This is day 6 of the October 88 7-day retreat. One question was, I'm getting confused when you talk about self-concern. What exactly you mean by it? Do you mean that it is self-concern when one is concerned about taking care of oneself? How one feels with regard to one's physical well-being, health, and so forth? I'm glad this was brought up, because the hindrance or enclosure that we were addressing yesterday or other times of constantly thinking about oneself or about what one will become, or the need to feel important or so, this is not the same as taking care properly and intelligently of the body. Unless this becomes a constant worry and preoccupation of the mind. How one feels. Some people are so preoccupied with how they feel, and it's almost the whole content of their conversation with others. That is the self-concern we were talking about. But to take careful, intelligent care of our physical body is not what I would call self-concern. Contrary to the extent that we do take good care of ourselves, we do not become a burden to others to take care of us. And in this, since we're on the topic, and taking care of oneself is being sensitive, and one may find one grows increasingly sensitive to one's needs for exercise, fresh air, maybe part of the exercise, strenuous exercise, to get the heart rate up. Some deep breathing, getting out of breath by walking up a hill or running. Stretching. It's a marvelous thing to watch a cat or dog stretch. They're not doing exercises. They're just stretching. I can't describe, we've all seen it. It's a delight to watch. It affects every part of the body. And all the little hairs on the cat are also stretching, sticking out. Being sensitive and growing increasingly sensitive to what food one eats, how it agrees with the body, the quantities. Very early in life, I've read this, we overpower or outdrown what is called an apostat within us, some kind of a feedback to tell us when we've had enough, or else, if I don't remember it right, it comes into function too late, when we've already eaten more than what is really enough for the stomach to take care of. So can one, no matter what has happened to this appetite, can one be sensitively aware what is enough? And there, memory can come in very helpfully. Having some idea from memory how much is enough, how much was too much. Even if one feels like eating more because it tastes so good. There is a real attachment, a clinging to the taste of food, wanting to prolong that tasting at the expense of overloading the stomach. And then maybe feeling miserable for several hours for the sake of a few minutes of more tasting. To wear the right clothes at the right time, keep warm, keep cool. The physical organism, including the brain, is a miraculous instrument with tremendous capacity and potential. And we usually learn to abuse it rather than treat it according to its needs. Needs for functioning optimally. And unfortunately, these abuses is what is often very pleasurable to the senses. The senses, and the enjoyment that they bring do not give proper feedback on what is healthful and wholesome for the organism very often. So one has to find ways and means to correct the lack of feedback through remembering. Although when there is the growing sensitivity, often one can tell, one begins to tell when something is off or enough. And to guard against ideas, moralistic ideas or self-punitive ideas, to take the place of this intelligence. Because we may have all kinds of ideas and feelings, attitudes toward food from way back in our childhood, how a child is nourished and fed in very early months has tremendous impact on our eating habits, attitudes toward food. Of course, if one is feeling depressed or down on oneself, very often eating food becomes an escape. Maybe the only thing that is agreeable or pleasurable at the time. Again, can one go to the root of depression and self-deprecation? And not take it out on food one way or the other. one person said, I see the need for discipline in this work, self-discipline, and yet I really resist it with all my being at times. What is it that one is resisting? Even to find that out takes some quiet, open-spaced inquiry, doesn't it? Having some time without pressure, some quietness, to really get acquainted and maybe intimate with this resistance against doing something that, on the other hand, one feels one needs to do, requiring discipline, is how the person put it. Maybe if the moment we utter this word to ourselves, I need some self-discipline, that word may already evoke the resistance. Because we may have been told and heard a lot about discipline, lack of discipline, more discipline in a repressive or threatening setting of a home, a school, a church. And all the rebellion that was not possible to be expressed at the time in the setting, still there and finds an outlet when the setting is not threatening. Actually, the word discipline means the faculty of learning, of studying. And the disciple in olden days was not necessarily a follower of a religious leader, but a student to an academic teacher or a doctor. If one is really interested in finding out something, no matter what, watching a praying mantis on a blade of grass, or a droplet on a twig, on a branch, forming, rounding, and then detaching. If one is interested in watching and finding out, one stops and looks, doesn't one? One doesn't say at this moment, now I have to impose discipline on myself. It happens with the interest, with the presence of what attracts the interest, what presents itself to be examined and looked at closely, freely, without time pressure. So the first thing that presents itself in this case is the resistance, the resentment against imposing discipline upon oneself. So will one examine that as an interesting phenomenon that is occupying the mind and body? Not just the mind, the body is engaged or held in resistance. Not just thought, but every cell and muscle fiber of the body is likewise engaged in this, in rebellion or resistance or fear or anger. So it is a total observation of a total phenomenon. All of oneself, of all of oneself. So if the connection with old memory, resentment of, as we mentioned in this case, how one was forced to be disciplined, or so, if that doesn't get in the way, one may find that and see it and not let it obstruct the inquiry. Then it may not be such an ornery thing, or whatever the word is, such a horrible thing to allow some time to sit quietly in the presence of what is. Doesn't have to call it self-discipline if that's an irritating word. One may have a real resistance against any kind of schedule during the day, any kind of orderly functioning in time. Also, maybe in resistance to what one was forced to do in earlier years. And yet one may find out that one can function optimally if there is some order in the day, not to be rigidly adhered to when it doesn't work out, or can't work out, something comes up, not feeling guilty that one hasn't kept one's schedule, becoming obsessed with it. Then there's something to examine, isn't there? Something to plumb. Fear of not following something, which is also ancient. Fear of not obeying something, of being remiss. Yet I personally find during a retreat, with all the hours of being with people, there's more hours than I think during my normal day. There's always time for a rest, always time for some yoga, there's always time for 40, 50 minutes of a walk. And there's a feeling of well-being and energy. And not a feeling that I'm being disciplined by a schedule or being dominated by a schedule. The schedule is a very reasonable thing to get to do all the things that we do in a retreat. See everybody, have enough time for meetings and so forth. It is in this respect reasonable. One may be tired in the morning and one doesn't get up this early normally. And yet the reasonableness of it, the functionality of it, doesn't arouse or let come into being any resistance to it. Sometimes people who come here to try out how it is to work here say, this place is too unstructured. I need more structure. I need more discipline to really be able to function. I'm too inert otherwise, or go too much with sluggishness or whatever. I think that also needs to be examined if one feels that way. If one wishes to examine it. What is inertia? Sluggishness. These are not just states to be condemned, or these are not states we really know. We have to find out what it is. And what is the desire for imposition of more discipline? What are the consequences of subjecting oneself to a system like that? It hasn't come up in this retreat, so we don't need to spend any more time on that. Someone said, as I get into this way of looking, working, I see it's such a solitary affair. It has a lot to do with being alone. Doing this alone, it is really quite individualistic. And I'm wondering, being used to sharing with people, what will happen? Will I be able to share this with others? Or will I become an outsider in my relationships with others, doing this work, not being able to share it? I think this brings up a much deeper question of how are we related to each other? To really look at that, examine it in relationship. A lot of things about ourselves we only find out in relationship. Don't find them out when we're alone by ourselves, when we're not challenged or stimulated by others. So being in relationship with a great deal of interest and awareness of how it functions, how we are related, is part of this work of finding out about oneself and each other. Nothing to be done totally in the absence of each other. Even here, where one is working alone and can establish some sense of aloneness by not looking at each other, establish a sort of a space of aloneness. Yet there is relationship in the kitchen, at work, in coming into a room, and so forth. But coming back to the basic question, how are we related to each other? What is the basis of our relationship? When do we feel that we are having a good relationship with each other? Enjoy each other's company. It's very often when we share the same interests, can talk about the same things, inform each other, and be interested because we're both interested in the same topic, so it's nice to get more information on the same topic, discuss it, and so forth. So common interest and common causes in which one works together are binders in relationship. If for some reason the interest of one changes or that particular interest drops, then one may find one has no relationship to this person anymore. It's like a stranger. Because there's physical attraction in relationship. And that may be the bonding, physical pleasure one has in each other's company. And if that changes, there's also estrangement. One wonders what one saw in each other as the physical bonding doesn't continue. A lot of our mutual relationship is dependency upon each other, needing each other for keeping house, taking care of the family, meeting the payments jointly, always increasing bills. Or depending on each other for comfort, for company, hating to be alone, being scared of being alone, feeling lonely and wanting company to not be exposed to this deep ache of loneliness which inhabits almost every human being, and which is a tremendous dynamic force in finding companionship, not to be in touch with that ache of loneliness. Because there are tremendous social pressures impinging upon us to be related, not to be single. Ideas about having someone to take care of one in old age, having children to take care of one. Which is all a very tentative basis for relationship, isn't it? Or impermanent, since we talked about permanence yesterday, because all of this may change. The partner in old age may leave one, die or go with someone else. We don't have to go into the whole specter. We all know it. We've all seen it around us, in our own family maybe. Close friends, relatives, the tenuousness of our relationships. Have we exhausted the foundation of human relationship? Of course I probably forgot many other factors that can bring people together temporarily or maybe for a lifetime. Just the sheer habit of having always lived together and the security of habit, the predictability of it, or the seeming predictability, is always a shock when suddenly that person isn't there anymore, died or seriously ill. And then what is the relationship? At the beginning of the retreat, someone brought this up to me, saying, you mentioned that your relationship with people coming to retreat is one of friendship, and I question that. How can a person possibly feel friendly toward so many different people. And it's good to question everything. In others and also in oneself, but also to call somebody on, are you making a hypocritical statement? And this question has cropped up during this retreat, off and on. What the person asked, he said, you wouldn't have everybody in this retreat over for dinner, would you? I didn't mean everybody together. But associate in this kind of a way which we usually associate with friendliness. And I said, no, probably not. But then, over the time, every once in a while, thinking of dinner friendships. People one does invite over for dinner. I lived a life before I started this of lots of dinner invitations, having people over for dinner, friends. But there was rarely, if ever, any depth of the relationship as it is here when we meet. Usually, the conversation did not go below the surface of relating to each other, narrating, and sometimes the most interesting dinner occasions were when we got into political arguments. At least something was happening. So here, in meeting together and exploring things not just superficially but in depth, that is being related to each other, exploring the same thing together. Putting aside for the time being whether one is somebody who would invite each other for dinner to the house. That's irrelevant at the moment. It may grow out of this. But two human beings exploring in depth, starting without knowing, looking, asking each other, would you make that clear? What do you mean by that? Trying to feel oneself into the situation, into the person. Not the personality necessarily, but the real thing, the concern, the human concern, which goes beyond all personality traits. In that there is a tremendous energy and love and closeness which you don't have to label at all. So coming back to the question, this work being solitary, yes, it has that quality. Unless one looks for oneself within and outside, one cannot really share or investigate together. Just to try to find out what the other person says and sort of agreeing with that. That's not this kind of relationship. It is to look for oneself and then come together and look for oneself in being together. Albeit also open to what the other person is saying. And the question is this possible? Leaving the retreat? Leaving the people who are into this? My circle of friends at home, as far as I know, is not. How will we meet now? I don't know. You have to find out. Maybe what happens is an increasing faculty to listen to someone. One doesn't know what will come up in this listening. If somebody doesn't ask one about this work, will one just keep trying to convince or proselytize about it? Influence someone? That's not being related. Although that's another ingredient of relationship. One may like to be with people upon whom one has influence, because it makes one feel important. But that's not what we're talking about here, about the deep foundation of being related. One may listen more carefully to one's friends at home. And yet, the other person may not be interested in this inquiry, may be leery of it, or protective, defensive, or just not interested. So then what will happen? How does one know? One will see. If we couldn't relate to anybody except people who work on looking into themselves in a deep fashion, one would be pretty solitary, particularly if one doesn't live around someone who is into this. And a person who is into this today during retreat may not be into it tomorrow when retreat is over. May say, leave me alone with this, I've had enough of it. So it's so much to observe. Has one developed an image of oneself as an inquirer, a meditative inquirer? These things happen. They happen so automatic. One is something now and wants to have other people of like interest, have a common cause. To share one's identity, is that the motive? One has to look and question and look. Not say, no, I have no image of myself. One has to look, observe it sensitively. So can we meet each other on whatever level we are? Fully. Not I want the other person to meet me on my level fully. It may not happen. Or one may deceive oneself about the level one is on oneself. Just start. Be there. Listen and look. Is there love in the heart? An overflowing love? Or just wanting love from the other because the heart is so empty? one question was, you talk about fear and anger as part of this self-complex, the I consciousness. But isn't fear and anger, for instance, as an example, aren't they necessary life functions? I remember while belonging to a Buddhist center in which there are sentient beings are divided into 6 realms, one of which is the realm of animals. The teaching being that you, depending on your deeds in this life, you ascend to a higher realm or you drop to a lower realm. And each realm was sort of characterized by some particular traits. And if I remember correctly, the realm of animals was characterized by the trait of fear. And as one walks through the woods and steps on some branches and then a deer leaps away, one just sees a white tail flashing. One may say to oneself, that deer is afraid because it's running away from me. Or seeing these nature movies of animals being chased by the predator. So easily to project that this whole herd is in a panic of fear, running away from the cat. Yet the instant the cat has the prey, the herd slows down and grazes. None of them seem to suffer from nervous breakdown. If we had been through something like this, we couldn't eat for hours. Unless we are so inclined, in case of fear, to feed ourselves. And that may well be because the animal does not carry the image of what was. It carries an image of what danger is. And the animal intelligence responds instantly to that signal of danger and acts. But to say that this is fear is a human projection, because we are constituted differently. We can remember forever the horror of having been chased. And it may happen again, we think. And the whole body, the whole system is interconnected neurologically, chemically, to the memory. We can experience the same fright. One can dream about it and wake up sweat-bathed from what we call a nightmare. And yet nothing happened except a replay of memory images. So, what is functional for the maintenance of life or survival is this intelligent discernment of danger, of real danger. And the less the organism is preoccupied with the reliving remembered fearful incidents, the more it's capable of looking clearly and intelligently around if one is in a dangerous environment. A person was here in the last retreat from New York City, and lives right close to Central Park. And I asked her whether she goes for walks there. She says, of course I do. I know how to walk there. People have all kinds of ideas about Central Park. It's a marvelous park if you know how to walk in it. Of course, she says, when it's dark, you don't walk in Central Park. It would be a stupid thing to do. The organism supplies the wherewithal to react to a signal of danger, and getting the organism either ready to run or to attack. Stand one's ground, defend and attack, defend and attack. And we have all of this programmed into us. We have these, a reptilian brain, a mammalian brain. Just on top of it is a cortex with the more human-like functions of interpretation, association, and so forth. But these same ancient parts of the brain respond to an imagined danger. And that's where our dilemma comes in. That we respond with the same symptoms to a danger which is merely remembered, but not actual. So all of this preparation is for naught, except makes us feel sick. Or angry outbursts against whoever may be tripping us up or getting into our way. In the case of a real danger, this tremendous energizing of the organism is most helpful. The energy being there to see clearly and act intelligently. It's as though the surge of energy was flooding this little rivulet which is just me. And this is why so often in cases of great emergency, people do very selfless acts with great energy and not much concern whether their own life is at stake or not. The pulling out of a boy that impressed me so deeply once. There was a river going through a city and flooded 40 feet high. A man saw a boy on a bicycle being swept right past him, and he just jumped in. It wasn't his son, it was just a boy. And the boy he managed to get him into a safe place, but he drowned. So was he acting out of fear or out of this energy of seeing the danger and acting appropriately? Could say, well, it was not so appropriate as far as his own life was concerned. But maybe in this instant, there is not my life and your life. It's life. That kind of thought structure is covered by the flood of energy. And the sharpened senses and an alert brain. Later, as that energy subsides and thought gains ground again, there may be a shock of what one did or what could have happened to one. Remember this after an air raid where the house was on fire. no thought of fear, just the action of getting the water up into the attic, and then afterwards a deep depression with flood of thoughts of this is now going to happen again. And it could have been much worse. We could have burned, we could have been suffocated or buried under the ruins. And on with thought, and on with fear. What life function does that have other than, it has no function for life. It is degenerative of life, destructive of life. Because the organism does things which are not appropriate. All the juices that are mobilized just circulate around there, doing harm, because they're not used up properly. We are an unfathomable machine or organism or instrument. And we only understand a fraction of its functioning. A lot of its intricate, sophisticated functioning we're not even aware of. Sometimes one opens a magazine, recently it was in Time magazine, and popularized article about the functioning of the human immune system. It was mind-boggling. What is going on? Can one become aware of some of this functioning without ideas about it? Just be in touch with it. See how it operates, so one is not deceived by it, has false ideas about it. Or is taken in by mistakes that are made. We mentioned one yesterday, we're mentioning one today, to the organism responding in the same way to an imagined danger as it would to an actual danger. That is a mistake that the brain makes. And yet as the mistake is very palpable, as the body is manifesting these symptoms of fear. The thought may have eluded one or it's gone, but now the body is manifesting symptoms of fear, which one has always known to be symptoms of fear. Feeling those, one thinks again that there must be something dangerous because the body feels this way. It's an amazing thing to realize for oneself, how a state of mind, a state of body which has been triggered by a thought, the thought is gone, no more there, now says something is dangerous because this is the way I feel. It's all associated stuff. So can one be wise to it by listening? Innocently, as it were, freshly, fearlessly. It sounds paradoxical, but it is only in thought. Is it possible to listen fearlessly to the state of fear? I'm using the word listen to it, can mean experiencing it, being with it, not running away from it. finding out about it. If there is such interest and willingness, one may even catch that first thought that triggered all of that and see the connection. Then it's just a matter of sitting it out patiently, or lying it out, or walking it out, or wherever one may find oneself, allowing this organism to come to equilibrium again without burdening it with further input. And it will come to equilibrium if there is no further input. Oh, this is bad, I don't like it, I must overcome it. Which is the input of conflict. We will end here for today.